It rains in every house. So this is what Christian women do to keep their marriage. They endure, including abuse. I believe many Christian women are living by a lie that they would never admit they believe. Not because they defend it, quite the opposite. Because if I were to ask you, does suffering make a woman valuable? You probably say, that's ridiculous. Nonsense talk. Of course not. That's not biblical. And you're correct. So let me ask you another question. If you do not believe it, why do you feel guilty when you rest? Why do you apologize for wanting to be treated right? Why do you feel selfish for wanting better for yourself? Why do you measure your worth by how much pain you carry? You see, I find that the beliefs that we reject with our mouth are sometimes the very beliefs that we obey with our lives. A few days ago, I came across a post and I'll attach it here for you to see. Men were created, women were made, and the rest, including abuse. So you see, that post was made to mock a woman for living a toxic marriage. The writer was condemning her for living. And you see, his message was very simple. A good woman stays. A good woman endures. A good woman suffers. And yes, including abuse. Now, I didn't actually make this video to talk about him because, of course, people make foolish posts on the internet every day. So this is not new. But I made this video because of you. The woman who would see this post and instantly reject it. Me, made to endure abuse. God forbid. Nonsense writing. Rubbish talk. And you're correct, but you've spent 10, 15, even 20 years of your life living as though this were true. That is the lie I want us to talk about today. Not that suffering doesn't exist, because it does, but the idea or the belief that suffering is what makes you valuable. And once that belief settles in your heart, it changes what you tolerate, what you excuse, what you expect, and eventually it changes what you think about yourself. So let's talk about it. One thing about lies is that it rarely announces itself as lies. They usually arrive dressed in wisdom. They sound responsible, mature, even spiritual. These lies sound something like, it's not that bad. Every marriage is difficult. At least it doesn't reach you. It rains in every house. Be more submissive. Be more patient. Now, none of these statements are necessarily false. That's why they are dangerous. Because truth can become a hiding place for lies. Yes, every marriage has its difficulties, but not every marriage is emotionally unhealthy. Every Christian should be patient, but patience is not permission for repeated dysfunction. Forgiveness is biblical, but it was never designed to eliminate boundaries and wisdom. That is how these lies work. They don't always tell you that something is completely false, but they stretch the truth so much that it can be able to hide under it. And over time, your expectations begin to shrink until this becomes your new normal. But the danger isn't that you have consciously chosen a life of emotional exhaustion. The danger is that you have become so familiar with it that it no longer feels abnormal. No longer feels strange. Have you ever come across one of those anonymous hide my ID marriage kind of posts? You begin the same way. My husband is a good man. My husband is a kind man. And then they go on to describe some of the most vile things that you've ever heard. Man inhumanity to man. That's where you see. My husband is a good man, but he insults me at any chance he gets. Embarrasses me in front of the family. He locks the kitchen when we are quarreling, but he cheats on me. Then almost as if he's supposed to answer the question as to why this man is still a good man. You hear something like, oh, he provides for the family. At least he doesn't beat me. Kai, not to undermine financial provision and the other reasons. But since when did those become the finish line? When did providing become enough to explain away emotional neglect or emotional abuse? When did he doesn't hate me become enough to overlook constant contempt? When did we lower the standard so low that the absence of the worst became our definition of good? Think about how strange that is. It's almost like somebody recommending a restaurant to you, and then you ask about the food, and the person says, don't worry, you won't die. That is good to me. But that is not the only standard for a great meal. Or imagine someone saying, my boss is amazing. My boss is wonderful. Why? He pays me. Sorry, are you working for free? Are you not supposed to be paid? That's the minimum requirement. Not even a bonus. Good work ethics, respect. It's just salary. It's not the complete definition of a good employer. So why do we do this with marriage? Why do we praise people for doing what they should do, what is already expected of them, while ignoring everything that slowly destroys intimacy? A marriage can have financial provision and still be emotionally bankrupt. A woman can have food on the table but still be starving for kindness. She can have a husband in the house but still feel alone. But this isn't about your husband. No, this is about your standards. Because your standard tells me the story you believe. If somewhere along the line you started believing that your emotional well-being, it doesn't matter, that being seen, being heard, being loved doesn't really matter, then eventually you start calling survival good marriage. And that's the tragedy. You see, most women don't stay because they love suffering. No, they stay because their definition of good has quietly become it could be worse. So the absence of the worst has now become the definition of good. And once that happens, you stop expecting the kind of relationship, the kind of marriage that God designed for you. You stop pursuing fulfillment. You stop pursuing flourishing. You settle for survival without even realizing how low the standard has become. But lives never stop at your standards. No, eventually they rewrite your identity. So you now believe that emotional loneliness is normal. It's a normal thing in marriage. You see kindness as a bonus rather than a right you should receive from your partner in a healthy marriage. You have learned to live on emotional crumbs and you call it contentment. You stop asking for safety, for support, because asking begins to feel selfish, begins to feel like you're doing too much, you're crossing the line. You quietly convince yourself that if you're being hurt by your partner's actions or inactions, the right thing to do is to endure. Instead of confronting it, discussing it, you better keep quiet, swallow it. You're a married woman, but you're living like a single mother. No offense to single mothers, but you know what I mean. It means you're living without the support of your husband because you're literally carrying all of the burdens, doing all of the work for your household, and looking to your husband, to your partner for support. It's like disrespect or being ungrateful for all of the things he's doing, providing financially. Sometimes you don't even have that, you still provide. And the frightening part is you don't think you're settling for less. You think you're being a good woman. You don't think you've lowered the standard. You think you've accepted reality. Even as I speak, you don't even believe that you've accepted a lie. You think that you've matured. That's how powerful this story is. It doesn't persuade you to reject God's design. It convinces you that this is God's design. That this is simply what marriage is. This is what Christian women do. It reigns in every house. So this is what Christian women do to maintain their marriage, to keep their marriage, to endure. That love means asking for less, needing less. That faithfulness means enduring more. So you're no longer asking, is this a healthy relationship? You start asking, am I enduring enough? And that's the trap, because suffering becomes the scale you use to measure your level of being a good woman. And some women justify it. You hear them saying things like, I'm carrying my cross. But what they don't know is that they are not just carrying their cross, but they are also carrying someone else's refusal to carry theirs. So they are carrying their cross as well as their partner's cross. This is why we have to go back to the beginning, not to culture, not to society, not to tradition, not to even your own experiences, not to that. We have to go back to Genesis. Because before anyone told you who a woman is, or who a woman should be, God has already said something about that. God has already told you who you are. When people talk about biblical womanhood, they run straight to submission. But God doesn't. The Bible introduces woman another way. Before she is a wife, a mother, a helper, she is something else. She is an image bearer, created in the image of God. Don't rush past it. Your dignity existed before marriage. Your worth existed before your children. Your value existed even before you could be of help to anybody. God didn't wait until you became useful before declaring you valuable. He settled your worth at creation. That changes everything. Because if your value comes from God, then nothing or no one can increase it, and no relationship can take it away from you. Then Genesis describes the woman as a helper suitable for others. Many people hear helper. Immediately, they imagine an assistant. But the Hebrew word is Ezer. The remarkable thing is, God himself is repeatedly referred to as the helper of his people, the helper of Israel. Not because he's inferior, of course you know he's not, but because he brings strength where strength is needed. So from the very beginning, Scripture wasn't describing weakness. It was describing strength that is offered in partnership. God never designed women to be the dumping ground for everyone else's immaturity. He never designed you to absorb disrespect, to keep taking it until you disappear. No, he created someone in his image, someone in his character with wisdom and dignity, someone whose worth was rooted in him, which means your value cannot be measured by the pain you carry. Your worth cannot be measured by the amount of pain you can survive. In fact, the more clearly you understand your identity as an image bearer, the less likely you are to confuse dysfunction with discipleship, because God never called you to find your identity in exhaustion. He called you to find it in him. So let me ask you this question, and I need you to answer it honestly. If your daughter grew up believing everything that you believe about yourself, would you be happy? Would you be fulfilled? Would you want her to believe that her needs are inconsequential? Would you want her to believe that her voice does not matter? If your answer is no, then why have you accepted this story for yourself? Because that is what this entire video is about. That story, the story of believing inside. And every story produces a life. The story that says my needs don't matter produces a woman who never asks. The story that says my value comes from what I can endure produces a woman who never stops carrying. The story that says if I sacrifice a little more, then maybe things will change. Maybe he will see me clearly or love me, or he will now appreciate what I'm doing. That story produces a woman that will continue giving and giving until she has nothing left to give. You did not intend to believe this story, but as you can see, every decision you have made so far has quietly been agreeing with it. So the question isn't simply, what kind of marriage do I have? No, far from that. The deeper question is, what kind of story have I been living in? Because that story is what shapes how you see yourself and how you treat yourself. And until that story changes, everything else will eventually return to the same place. So let me leave you with this. Following Jesus comes with its own measure of suffering, but that kind of suffering is suffering for righteousness' sake. So there is a profound difference between suffering for righteousness and making peace with dysfunction. There is a difference between forgiveness and enabling wickedness, humility and self-erasure, carrying your cross and carrying another person's refusal to change. Don't confuse it. God never asked you to prove your worth through exhaustion or to earn your dignity through endless sacrifice. He never asked you to disappear so everybody else can be comfortable at your own expense. No, he doesn't demand that of you. Long before you became Mrs. Mommy, long before you became the woman that people can depend on, you were first his image bearer. Your dignity comes from him. Your worth comes from him. Your identity comes from him. Not from how much abuse you can endure, not from how much pain you can absorb, not from how little you ask for, not from how invisible you can become. The cross proves your value, that it doesn't need to be earned, because while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So your worth is settled by grace, not your performance. So maybe the first step isn't changing your circumstances today. Maybe the first step is refusing to keep living in that story. Go back to Genesis. Go back to the God who declared your worth even before anyone asked anything of you. And when you do, live like a woman who actually believes it. Watch this video as many times as possible until this sinks into your mind, and share it with any woman you know needs to hear this. She might not need a motivational quote. She might just need a different story. If this is the kind of conversation you like, then stay, subscribe, and join this community. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.